Welcome to the first show. Today we're going to be breaking down our picks for the 2024 MLB season. We're here with Nate and Bebs. Then we also additionally will be picking 3 players that we think will break out or just 3 players to watch this season. And we're going to go right into it. We're going to start off hot with Bebs' pick for the AL East. He has the Orioles winning it all. What goes into that pick, Bebs?
So the Orioles, they're a hot young team. Emphasis on the hot with all that young talent that they have coming up through the pipeline. So not only that, but they made a big splash in the trade market here in the off season, picking up Corbin Burns from the Milwaukee Brewers. So I think he's going to slot right in to be their number one guy and get a lot of innings for them. So not only that, but they got plenty of other guys down their list. Grayson Rodriguez is a nice young pitcher. John Means, reliable arm. And then other good depth pieces. But they got some real studs in their lineup as well. You got, Adley at catcher. He's a real up and comer. Gunnar Henderson. There's got a lot of pop, a lot of
Yeah, I
flair.
really like that. They have Jackson Holiday too, who's probably going to start the season in the minor leagues, but he's an absolute stud. I'm pretty sure he's the number one prospect in baseball right now, and he'll be up playing for them at some point this season.
They also recently were bought by Cal Ripken, so they're under new management now. So there's a lot more money to go around for them. So they're gonna be able to spend more than the Orioles have been spending the last few years.
Yeah, it's an interesting season for them this year because it's the first season where they really have expectations. Like going into last year, people didn't really know what to expect because they had a decent season in 2022, but after they won the division, people are going to expect playoff success. So there's a little bit of pressure on them this year as well.
For sure, because I think they came out. I think they went over 100 wins last season, and then were knocked out in the first round of the playoffs, I believe. So that's, tough way to go out. But I think that because they were so young and inexperienced, they didn't have that expectation. But now they're definitely up there. A lot of people are counting on them too. I think it's going to be tough to exceed that same, like, I think they had 101 wins last year. I think it's going to be tough to exceed that same kind of win total, but people are at least expecting more of a run in the postseason, at least.
Yeah, it's always going to be difficult in the AL East as well because there's 5 at least. I mean, even the worst team in that division is still a solid team, so the wins don't come easy there.
For sure. Yeah. Personally, I think Boston will probably be at the bottom of that division, and I think that they could still, they could easily win the Central, and they would probably even push to win the West most seasons. This season, even.
Yeah, I can see that for sure.
Nate, you had a bit of a what I think some people would say is a pretty controversial take for the AL East. You have the Yankees winning it all,
Well, not winning it all, just winning the
or
division.
winning the division.
There we go. I would not pick them to win the World Series. But I mean, everybody knows that they went out and they got Juan Soto in the offseason. So that's a huge acquisition. And that really fills a need for them because like a left fielder has been something that they've really struggled with for a while, ever since Brett Gardner kind of started to fall off. So that's actually huge for them. And it'll be nice if Juan Soto can play some at least decent defense out there before he'd want to go above somehow. I don't really know how because he's not that great, but he at least has the tools to be a decent defender. And I mean, everybody knows about his hitting. Such he's honestly probably the best pure hitter in the game right now. Everybody knows they have Aaron Judge still, and they have Garrett Cole, and their bullpen is solid still. One player I'm looking at on their team, not this isn't even one of my breakout players, but I think Carlos Rodon could be a key to their season because he was a big acquisition for them last year, and he kind of flopped because he was hurt, and then he played, and he wasn't that great when he played either. But I think with the full offseason this year, I think he could come out and he could perform like he has in the past. He was with the Giants for one season, he had a really great year, so I could see that happening. And I could see the Yankees just being the best team in that division because they've spent the most money and it's helped them field a great team.
I can agree with the fact that the Yankees have a lot of good players, but at the same time, I think especially the last few years in the AL East, it's proven like money doesn't equal wins because the Yankees have struggled a lot with Giancarlo Stanton striking out a lot and then lots of injuries. So the Yankees spending a lot of money doesn't always equal wins, but I think Juan Soto was a great addition. I think he's one of the most exciting players to watch, and I think the Yankees have a good chance. It just kind of depends on how the Orioles fall in, because I think it's the Orioles division to lose this year, which is not something that could have been said years ago. But I think it's a big toss up because you also have the Blue Jays coming in who have a lot of young talent. They have Vladdy Jr. So I think the Blue Jays could be in contention for winning the division. But I also think the team that a lot of people expect something out of has to be the Rays this year after starting with one of the best starts in baseball history and then not really doing much the rest of the year and then losing the division to the Orioles. I think the AL East is between the Rays and Orioles.
Yeah, personally, I'm going with the Yankees, but there's one problem with the Yankees is that I'm not a fan of Aaron Boone as the manager, and that's kind of a big thing. He also gets a lot of heat, and I think it's deserved because they have a really good roster and they seem to underperform a lot of the time. But I just have a feeling that this season they're going to come away at the end of the season in first place.
I mean, truthfully, the only thing I'm concerned about the Yankees is their potential starting pitching depth. Obviously, you have Cole, but from there, like Rodon, if he's healthy, he's a fantastic pitcher. And then from there, they have, I think they picked up Marcus Stroman this offseason. And I mean, he's projected to be their third pitcher, which he had a fantastic year last year in Chicago, but I don't know if he'll replicate it in New York per se. Um, but
Yeah,
from there,
that's definitely an issue. Like, and
from there,
especially playing in New York, there's a lot of
yeah.
pressure there.
And I really like the pickup in the offseason. It kind of flew under the radar, but it was a rare Yankees Red Sox trade getting Alex Verdugo. And I think that he will fill a nice kind of hole for them as well. That gives them some consistent outfield. I mean, having Verdugo, Judge, and Soto in the outfield is, I mean, possibly the top outfield trio in the league.
Yeah,
And
honestly, I don't think I could choose or find a better three outfielders in the league. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. That was a lot of people didn't talk about that, but he's a very good player.
my other guy for them is a guy to watch is Anthony Volpe for sure. That young shortstop. I think he could be a very good five tool type guy. So we'll see. He might. I mean, he'll have some ups and downs, but they have a lot of
Yeah, I'm
potential.
also yeah, he's been a stud prospect. I'm kind of disappointed that Grayson Dominguez got hurt at the end of last year. I believe he had to have Tommy John surgery, so he most likely won't be able to play most of this year because he was looking pretty decent last year, and he's had a lot of tools and been raised as a prospect as well. But they'll be missing him for sure.
Right now, yeah, I believe he's out until the All Star break, more or less. But we'll see. Yeah, I think they're as good a pick as any. It just depends on if they'll actually live up to that, I guess, pressure that people always put on them.
I don't think there's an awful
That's a
pick.
good question.
There's
All
not
right,
a bad pick.
Shane, who did you pick for
I,
first place?
I picked the Orioles, obviously. The Orioles, as Beb said, young team. The last 2 years have come out and really surprised people. I mean, like the Orioles really came out of nowhere. But if it's not the Orioles for me, I have the Rays winning it. I think the only thing the Rays are really going to struggle with this year is keeping that same consistent offense from last year and the pitching question marks. You got no Shane McClanahan. Tyler Glasnow is gone. You have Shane Baz coming back, but Shane Baz has a history of injuries. But pre-injury, coming from the Pirates, he's pitched well for the Rays. But it's just a matter of if the Rays can keep the pitching because Rays have historically had bad bullpens, and if the bullpens continue that streak, I don't know if the offense can continue to pull them through, and I don't know if the starting pitching that the Rays have been so used to is there anymore.
So I noticed, of course, you picked the team with the most amount of Shanes on it as possible. I like that.
Yeah, two pitchers.
But
Both.
yeah, I respect that you have to be a homer for the Rays, but they're definitely up there in contention for the AL East. I think, in my opinion, there's a clear top three teams. I'm actually not as high on the Blue Jays this season. I actually picked them to finish last in the division personally, which might seem kind of crazy, but I just see the Yankees, Orioles, and Rays above, so much farther above the Red Sox and Blue Jays in that division.
Yeah, I can see that. I think there's really, like, for the AL East, there's no bad team. I think personally, it would surprise me if we see the Red Sox in playoff contention at all. I don't even think the Red Sox have a chance to make the wild card. But as always, the AL East is kind of one of those. You'll have your top three teams, and then one team will sneak in and knock one of those top three out. So that could be the Red Sox. But I personally, in I put Orioles, Rays, Yankees, Blue Jays, Red Sox. I think the Red Sox finish last. I think they're in a rebuild stage. I don't think they have what it takes to really compete in a division that's so stacked like the AL East.
Yeah, read out what I had listed in order.
All right. So, Nate, you had Yankees finishing first, Rays, Orioles, Red Sox, Blue Jays. And I actually, even though I am a Rays fan, I actually don't think that the Rays finish over the Orioles in no matter what situation. I think the Rays fall behind them because the Rays have so many holes in the team right now.
Fair. You'd probably know better than me as well.
I mean, there's clear holes in the Rays pitching wise. There's a lot of people in spring training right now. What are we 2 games in? There's a lot of people in spring training right now that have to prove themselves. Brendan McKay is at the end of what I would call the end of his career with the Rays. If this is not a breakout year for him, I think his chances in Tampa Bay are done. But I would like to see Brendan McKay, now that he's no longer hitting, he's no longer a two-way player, I'd like to see Brendan McKay come through and fill that hole that Shane McClanahan's leaving, being hurt right now.
Well said.
I think that
So should we move on to the AL Central?
that about wraps it up for the AL East. So we're gonna dive on into the AL Central. Actually, I want to start with Bevs here again on the AL Central. So we obviously listed out our teams. Bevs just picked a winner from each one, which is completely fine. But he
Well, I thought that's what you were supposed to do.
it's fine. For the AL Central, Bevs has the Twins winning it all.
You gotta stop saying winning at all. That makes it sound like he picked them to win the World Series.
Winning the division, my fault.
Yeah, I mean, the Twins are definitely the most experienced, I would say, of that group. I think they have decent starting pitching depth with Pablo Lopez, Joe Ryan. They got a couple other guys who can help fill, obviously, like get them quality starts and get them wins. But outside of that, decent bullpen, pretty good closer. Have no idea how to pronounce his name. I know maybe it's just
He throws really hard. That's what I know.
yeah, exactly. But same with them. I mean, they're somewhat young. Like they got Royce Lewis, who was a high draft pick a couple years ago and battled some injuries, but he's finally healthy and ready to put in some work for them. And Brian Buxton, I think, is a guy who, when healthy, is a difference maker. And they were a pretty like rock solid lineup that if they perform well, they'll. I think the division winner is only going to win 90 games, so it's not like they're going to have an amazing year, but they should do just enough to compete. Though I think them and the Tigers will be pretty close because I think the Tigers are pretty strong in areas that the Twins are not, but mostly I think the Twins just have probably the best rotation in the division.
Across the board, all three of us picked the Twins to win it. Personally, I picked the Twins to win the AL Central just because Carlos Correa is on that team, And I feel like a lot of what can create playoff teams out of teams that probably shouldn't be there is players that know what it's like to be there. I think you can keep the clubhouse in the right mindset when they need to make pushes. But like Beb said, I don't see any team from the AL Central really blowing us away with a win-loss record.
Yeah,
I agree.
like it's got to be the weakest division in baseball, and it's really not even close. There's just so many teams that kind of disappoint in there. Like the White Sox were all hot a few years ago, and they've kind of fallen off the face of the earth at this point. It seems like it.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to find like really anything to talk about in the AL Central that doesn't sound like we're just bashing them. But the AL
I
Central
mean,
is not a good division. It's not fun baseball to watch. It literally is almost like just watching minor league baseball.
that might be a rough take on your part, but
I don't know.
I think
There's
I think that it just depends on what type of like what type of game you're looking for. I think every team is maybe I'll well yeah I think every team is super young and has a lot of pretty exciting players. Like the Tigers, for example, they have Tariq Skubal as their number one guy, and when he's healthy, he's a pretty high end pitcher. They have Spencer Peterson, Larry Green, um, Corey Carpenter had a breakout year last year, and they their top prospect Colt Keith at second base just got an extension. He should be an impact player right away. I think Javi Baez even like comes close to what he can do. I think that they have a lot of potential and a lot of youth, but there's their offense pretty much has to be consistent from day one to even have a chance. And then the other good thing about the AL Central is Bobby Witt, of course, but yeah, that's about it. To your point.
Yeah, I mean, we all picked the Twins to win, but I mean, it's kind of a weird division, so I could see other teams winning it. Like, I know I put the Tigers in second place as well because they have a young team, and I do like a lot of their pieces as well. I'm really high on Riley Green. I think he's going to be a great player, and Spencer Torkelson is very good as well. He started off the season kind of bad last year, but he finished it on a tear. The Guardians, I mean, you can't really forget about them. I believe Terry Francona retired, so that's actually a really big loss from a manager standpoint. But they still have Jose Ramirez, who's almost like he's probably a top five player in baseball. Honestly, he's that good. People just don't talk about him. And I mean, the White Sox have talent still, even if they were really bad last year. They still have Eloy Jimenez and Luis Robert is one of the most fun players to watch. They lost Tim Anderson, who had a bad season last year, so I'm not sure how big of a loss that is. They also have Yohan Moncada too, who used to be pretty hyped up, and he's kind of, fallen off past few years. But who knows? He could have a comeback season. And then there's the Royals, who of course have Bobby Witt Jr. But I don't know. I just don't really see the Royals have been kind of rebuilding for a while now, and I just really haven't seen much progress from them.
I would
Yeah, the
agree.
Royals definitely are not winning, but any of the other four, I think, could.
hmm I think that's a respectable take.
I think that's about all we can really talk with the AL Central about. And I think right
Yeah.
here, maybe one of the AL West may be one of the most divided divisions, probably across baseball for trying to predict. I personally have the Rangers winning the division. I know Beb said he has the Astros, and Nate has the Mariners winning the division.
Okay, so we all picked a different team that we all basically picked the three teams that are popular, or I don't know, the three teams that are
Right.
possible.
Those are definitely the only three those are three that will make any run
Yeah, well, given the
at it.
fact that Angels and Athletics are the other two, one of them doesn't even have a home, and the other one is wasting a superstar's career. So
At least they don't have Shohei Ohtani anymore,
that
so we
is
can see
true.
him in the playoffs now.
They went 1 for 2 on wasting careers. But I personally
Yeah,
picked the
they're smart enough to
Rangers.
do. I mean, it's not their fault, I guess.
I personally picked the
True.
Rangers to win it. I think the Rangers have what it takes to repeat Probably not repeat World Series. I wouldn't say they're all there for that, but I think the Rangers have what it takes to repeat a division championship. Probably, I don't know if they're, like I said, I don't know if they're World Series caliber to repeat, but bring back Corey Seager's big, and if Evan Carter manages to survive getting hit by a pitch, he's going to be a big part of it. I do, however, yeah, crawdads. I do, however, not I. That's badly worded. I don't think the Mariners. I don't think the Mariners have a shot, personally.
I think they have just as fine of a shot as the Rangers. I think the Rangers are going to fall off pretty significantly myself.
I agree with that as well because last season was kind of a weird year and they kind of just caught fire in the playoffs. And I think a lot of people kind of forgot about their flaws because to win in the playoffs, you don't need starting pitching. And the Rangers starting pitching in theory is kind of good, but they were kind of falling apart last year. And I think playing the Diamondbacks in the World Series helped a lot. And the main issue last year, which like people were not even sure if they were going to make the playoffs at some point, is their bullpen is atrocious. A couple guys stepped up at the end of the season, but their bullpen is horrible. And another big thing is they currently Jordan Montgomery is still a free agent, I believe, and he is honestly a really good pitcher, probably one of the most underrated left-handers in the game. And they're going to really miss him if they don't get him back. And I know Jacob deGrom could potentially come back at sometime this year, so that would be huge for them. But their pitching, in my opinion, is just not in a good standpoint. So I see them finishing in third place and being kind of disappointing this season.
Yeah, I can see that as a. I definitely think the AL West is another one of those that it's between the three, and I think honestly the AL West more than the AL East just comes down, like you said, whoever's going to catch fire in the back half of the year. I don't.
Yeah, that's why, I mean, all three of those teams have proven to be able to do that because I feel like all are the kind of team that can just go on a big winning streak. And whoever happens to get lucky at the end of the year and time it right, I think will just come out on top.
However, Bebs, I would like to know what went into your pick of the Astros.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty common pick, I guess. Like, it's safe. Obviously, they have the most established lineup by far. Like Jose Abreu, Jose Altuve. They got Bregman. They got Kyle Tucker. They got Jordan Alvarez. And then from a pitching standpoint, Verlander, if he's healthy. Framber Valdez is pretty much as consistent as you can get. And then they got some other, kind of wild cards. Like Christian Javier is a really solid pitcher, coming from that like relief into a starter role. Then they got a guy not a lot of people are familiar with, but Hunter Brown is another like young arm that last year, I know ERA wise he didn't do great, but I think he had like, from what I remember, like reading at least 170, 160, 170 strikeouts. So I think they just have a lot of depth and a lot of experience, and up and down the lineup, they just have a lot of firepower that will, I think, help them quite a bit. Like as they're making a postseason run once you get to like August, September.
Yeah, they're always just so scary to face in the playoffs. And then one player that I think is going to have a really great season for them is their catcher, Yainer Diaz, because um, Dusty Baker's gone now. And I know I keep talking about managers for some reason, but from what I understand, he really seems to always like to play Martin Maldonado, who is basically like putting your grandma out there in the batting order. Like you might as well,
Yeah.
it's an strike out every time, basically. And that honestly might be a little bit of a disrespect to your grandma, by the way. She might be able to get on base more often than Maldonado could. Used to be in there for his defense. He used to be a great defensive catcher. He's a lot older now, so he fell off a lot. But Yainer Diaz absolutely rakes. He didn't play that much last year, and he had a great offensive season. So I could see him becoming a key to them and winning the division. Honestly, I picked the Mariners just because I wanted to be a little bit different, and I just like them. But one thing I'm worried
Oh,
about with them,
100%.
yeah, one thing I'm worried about with the Mariners is their pitching, or not their. Never mind, their pitching is good. I'm worried about their hitting. Um, they lost a couple players in the offseason. They traded Jarrett Kelenic to the Braves. He had been kind of disappointing, but he's always had that potential of being a top tier prospect. But they just have a couple players I like. Of course, they have Julio Rodriguez, and I just kind of like the culture out there in Seattle. I feel like they always play tough. And I mean, I just have a feeling that they're going to be able to time their winning streak right, and at the end of the season, they're going to finish in first place. But I would not be surprised at all if the Astros win this division. It's probably the smarter pick in this scenario.
I mean, it's a safer pick, but I think that yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily who I want to see win, but just from a sheer, again, just talent level up and down the lineup. It's just big name after big name. So we'll see.
Yeah,
I mean, I think it'll
but
be a fun race either way. I do like. I
yeah, I
mean,
always I always watch
individually, I
love
like the Mariners.
watching. Yeah, I always love watching the top three teams play each other. Their games are always super entertaining, and there's always some drama in them or whatever. They come down to the wire, so it makes for some entertaining baseball in this division. At least from the top three teams, we don't really mention the the
I'm
Athletics and
taking
the
the
Angels.
Angels. Angels from the bottom all the way back to the top.
Let's see. After the subtraction of Shohei Ohtani,
Shohei
especially.
Ohtani was the problem.
I see. That's a great call. On that note, I think we should head over to the NL East.
I definitely NL West comes up first for us.
What?
I
Okay.
okay,
Okay, that's
I
interesting.
mean,
We're working our way. We're
but
working our way back
gonna be,
east. Okay.
but
there's not
with
going to
the
be much time
with
left, so it's okay.
with the NL West, it's obviously no surprise that all three of us picked the Dodgers. I don't think you have a payroll of $314.7 million and nobody expects you to do anything. I honestly think if the Dodgers, this might sound crazy, high expectations, but I honestly think if the Dodgers do not come out of this season with a ring, the entire front office of the Dodgers needs to be shipped to Shanghai.
I don't know about that, but I mean, once you get to the World Series and in the playoffs in general, anything can happen. But just because yeah, I mean, it's like the same thing as the Yankees. They have, like money, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work.
No, I
Yeah,
agree.
exactly.
I can't see anybody in that situation being happy if at least if the Dodgers make the World Series and they competitively play it and they don't just go in there and not do anything. I think if they make the World Series, money well spent. But if they just fizzle out in the playoffs, it's an awful decision for them.
I mean,
Well, I
personally,
mean,
they don't have Shohei pitching at all this season, so I could see pitching being somewhat of a problem for them. Not that they would not end up winning the division. I would be so surprised, honestly, if another team takes it from them. But I could see that becoming an issue in the playoffs. And I mean, currently, they're not my World Series favorite. That might be a little bit of bias for me, or a lot of bias for me, but I see them as kind of the second best team in the National League still because their starting pitching is, in theory, not as great right now. I think there's a possibility that some players prove themselves throughout the season, but that would be my one flaw with them. Their lineup is like an all-star game lineup. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
for sure. I mean, I think their starters are high upside, but I don't know if their floor is quite there. I mean, Walker Bueller is pretty solid, but I don't know how healthy he'll be. And then after that, I guess ahead of him though is that new Yamamoto guy who I think will be a fantastic pitcher, but who knows how it'll translate coming from I think Japan. And then Bobby Miller, I think, is also a fun young guy. But I just don't know how consistent he'll be this year either.
I think the
Yeah, I'm
Dodgers.
definitely excited to watch Yamamoto. I think it seems like all of these players that have come over from Japan, I really can't think of one that's flopped in a little bit. So I am excited to see how he pitches. Even if I don't like the Dodgers at all, I feel like he'll become a very good pitcher. His stuff is nasty, so that'll play anywhere.
And assuming the Dodgers have a healthy Tyler Glass now, that's another young pitcher that if he doesn't get hit with the Rays curse and he stays healthy, he could actually be a pretty big part of that rotation. I don't really
Is there any other teams worth talking about
I
in
don't
this?
think I don't think the Padres really have a shot in the world. I think the Padres had expectations here, and then as the years have gone on, those expectations have just dropped and dropped. I don't see the Padres even making a push. I think this is the Dodgers' division to lose.
I mean, I think
What do y'all think about the Diamondbacks
I don't.
after making the World Series?
I think the Diamondbacks. That's a fluke. I don't think they have what it takes to repeat that.
I mean, I don't think they have what it takes because of how loaded the division. Because I mean, realistically, like it's hard to overcome the Dodgers and the Braves, and even the Padres are still sneaky enough to be talented. But I don't think they're a fluke. I think the Diamondbacks are still a solid young team. But yeah, I don't think. I mean, to repeat in the World Series, I would say most likely absolutely not. But I don't think they're because they don't even. I mean, they made it as like a wild card last year, so it's not like they absolutely destroyed everyone in the regular season. They got hot when it mattered and beat good teams in the playoffs, and that's what you really have to do. But I think they're good enough to get that to like at least that 90 win threshold, and maybe sneak in as a wild card because their pitching is pretty deep. Then they got some really talented players in the lineup as well with like Christian Walker, Ketel Marte, Corbin Carroll obviously is very good. Nice young player. So they have talent. It just depends on if their inexperience, I guess, will take them to that point of competing with the other teams.
Yeah, I agree with that point. I think 90 wins is a solid projection for the Diamondbacks. The Padres, they could take a playoff spot this year, even though they lost Juan Soto. They had a really weird year last year. They lost a bunch of close games. So maybe the coin flips the other way this year. And also I mean, obviously, I think everybody knows the Rockies will come in last place there.
No,
But
Yeah,
I
no,
Charlie
the
Blackmon
Giants are
career-saving season inbound.
Yeah, Charlie Blackmon will hit 400 and have 75 home runs.
Charlie
Um,
Blackmon's gonna score every single run for the Rockies, single-handedly leading them to an undefeated season.
yeah, the Giants are always here in this division as well. They're they're always an interesting team. I mean, they had that explosion in 2021 where they won like 107 games, and that was kind of crazy. They're a few years removed from that now. I don't see them being bad because they have some solid players, but I just don't see them really. I don't really know if I could see them making the playoffs. Maybe they sneak in the last spot, but I don't see them making much noise this season. I'd
I
say
could
most
potentially,
likely.
yeah,
I was
yeah.
just gonna
I
say
think
most
that's
likely Charlie Blackmon will break out and make the
Yeah,
Hall of Fame this year.
I do think that the Giants could potentially be better than the Padres because I didn't realize the Padres actually lost as many players as they have. Like looking at their kind of their depth chart right now, it's really just Machado, Tatis if he can stay healthy and productive, and kind of the corpse of Xander Bogaerts. But other than that, like their pitching staff is not really good, and they have a lot of question marks up and down the lineup.
Joe
Yeah, they're
Musgrove.
not they're not gonna re-sign Blake Snell. That's a gonna be a big loss. So pitching is definitely their problem.
I'd say that's about
All
all that division really has going. I think it's a toss up if there's going to be one division where whoever comes in second is kind of like fighting to come in second, it's going to be that division. I really think I fully expect the Dodgers to win the division, but
no question.
I'm also 100% open to seeing the Dodgers fall flat on their face and the Giants come in and win the division like that. That would be also great, but in all reality, I don't think a Dodgers team stacked like that does not win the division.
Yeah,
Yeah,
agreed.
I think that's pretty much how everybody sees it. So I think you hit the nail on the head there. So I guess are we ready to move on to the NL
However,
Central?
the NL Central is one that Bev sat on the outlier on for this one. He has the Cardinals winning the Central, and me and Nate have the Reds winning it. Bez, what went into this decision with the Cardinals winning it?
So the Cardinals, I think that they sucked last year. They came in last, but I think that this team could definitely go from last to first. They have a deep rotation. Like they brought in Sonny Gray, who I think is still a very productive pitcher that can lead them. They brought in Kyle Gibson and Lance Lynn, who had down years last year, but also guys who have had a lot of success in their career. So if they can repeat some of that success from a couple years ago, then they will have a pretty rock solid starting rotation. And they have still Paul Goldschmidt, still have Nolan Arenado, and I really like Wilson Contreras in that catcher spot. I think that he brings a lot of experience, and another guy that I'm a pretty big fan of. That if he can stay healthy, I like Lars Nootbaar as well. I think that he's shown some nice potential and can be a pretty toolsy guy. But
I agree. He's just a good player.
Don
I like
Gorman,
that pick. I like that pick though. I think that's an interesting pick. And the Cardinals are always kind of a weird team, and except for last year, they seem to find a way to sneak into the playoffs somehow.
well, I mean, I'm not like super confident on it because I kind of like the Cubs as well, but um, I think that their pitching mixed with how dangerous their lineup can be if everything goes right. I think, I mean, that's a big if. Like everything pretty much for them has to go right for them to actually pull it off.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea taking a bit of a shot though. And this division is a little bit weird to me. Um, I'd say definitely both the central divisions are the worst divisions out of each league. And it's this one's not I don't think as cut and dry as the AL Central. There's a lot of teams that at least their teams are younger in this division, but they've shown more promise in the AL Central, and I think that's the big difference. And then I do want to say one other thing I like for the Cardinals is their outfielder, Jordan Walker. He's like a top prospect last year. I think, and he can
Yeah,
really hit. So he's a really good player.
I think mainly what went into my pick with the Reds though was they're the Reds are kind of a young talent team, but they've got a little bit of experience sprinkled in around. But I think the Reds fully surround themselves, or they build themselves around Ellie De La Cruz. I think he's a great young player. I think if he continues to break out how he is, I think we could see the Reds making some big strides towards being a more consistent playoff team and not getting shined out by teams like the Cubs. I like the Cubs. I like what they have. Re-signing Cody Bellinger today, that was a good move for them. But I don't think the Cubs are fully there yet to take the division, but it's one of those, it could be anybody.
yeah. I think my only
Yeah.
concern with the Reds is just how young they are. Like they really, I mean, kind of the same thing. Like with the Cardinals or any team in that division, everything pretty much has to go right. Like I'm a big fan of Spencer Steer. I'm a big fan of Ali De La Cruz and Matt McClain. I think they're great players, but I mean, it just depends on how consistent of production you're going to get from them. Like all three of them are super young still, so coming off of good rookie seasons. I just don't know if they'll. I mean, I think they'll repeat like that production, but I just don't know if they'll be able to do it all season long. And then their starting rotation concerns me quite a bit, but um, I don't know. I mean, I think the talent is there. It just is. Yeah, we'll see if they put it all together. I do think Ali De La Cruz though is one of the most overrated players right now, just based on he hasn't really shown much. He just is a flashy player, but we'll see.
Yeah,
I mean, I
I
think they
actually
have.
totally agree with that. To be honest, I think you just named Matt McLean and Spencer Steer. They were actually a lot better than him last year. And people don't notice that, but Ellie De Cruz strikes out a lot. I think though it's just his potential is so much that, and people like the
For
way
sure.
that obviously because he's so tall and he plays shortstop and he's a rocket arm and all the tools. I think like the red season is kind of dependent on if he can put it together because he could kind of be like I mean I know he doesn't play in the outfield but he's almost kind of got that Ronald Acuna Jr. kind of potential. So if he could somehow put it together and the other guys that are consistent contributors, they'll I think I can expect them to play well. That's kind of what I'm hoping for. But then also, like you said, their pitching is not great. I kind of just took a little bit of a shot in the dark and just picked them because I was hoping that Ellie De La Cruz maybe has a fantastic season.
I mean, I'm a big fan of the pick. Like, yeah, I love their lineup. I think even guys like Will Benson is a pretty under the radar guy who not a lot of people know, but um, he has some pretty good like power speed combo, and um, yeah, I mean, I think they're going to be a fun team. It just we'll see if this is the year they can put it all together. If they might be another year or two out, but I think that they're at the very least finish like close in that 2-3 spot, if not winning.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if they're horrible. Um, I don't really see. I guess the Brewers, in my opinion, should probably be the worst team in this division. They've kind of really scaled down their team, and their number one pitcher is Freddie Peralta now, I believe, who's he's a good pitcher, but I going from Corbin Burns and Brandon Woodruff as 1, 2, and Freddie Peralta as three to that is kind of disappointing. And their hitting is always still an issue. Devin Williams is great as a closer, but I mean, he may not get that many opportunities to close games. The Pirates also could end up in last just because they're kind of a weird team and they've been rebuilding just like the Royals and
Yeah,
they haven't showed that much promise, but they still have Key Brian Hayes. I think will have a really great season, kind of announce himself to the league this year. And then they also people kind of forget O'Neal Cruz was kind of like Ellie De La Cruz before Ellie De La Cruz came up, but he broke his ankle and missed pretty much the whole season, I think. But he'll be back for this year, so it'll be interesting to see him play.
yeah. If he stays healthy, he'll be a really nice young player.
I
Yeah,
think
so Pirates are interesting, but I really don't know honestly who to pick in this division. I just kind of chose the Reds for that reason.
I think for the
I mean,
most part,
I like Brooklyn, so I think it's a good pick.
the Pirates I think finish last. I don't really think the Pirates have much. I don't think the Pirates really have had much. Um, but it's another one of those kind of divisions you can see what teams should win, but it's a long season and teams find strides, teams fall off. So the NL Central is going to be I think kind of a battle of the mids.
Yeah, the Cubs were there last year too. They were pretty solid for most of the year. They were about to make the playoffs actually instead of the Diamondbacks last year, so that would have been interesting to see what happened in another alternate universe, but they're not that great. They're okay. I mean, they have Justin Steele had an amazing season for them. He's interesting, and I'm always going to be a Dansby Swanson fan. So I pray that, or I hope he has a good season. Don't know if I pray on it, but
But
maybe not that important to me. But they're an interesting team. I could absolutely see them winning the division as well. They have a lot of solid young players too, like Nico Horner. I like him, and they have Ian Happ in the outfield as well. And I know they have some young players coming up, like Pete Crow Armstrong, is a good prospect. So I could see them kind of being the best team.
Yeah, I think that about wraps up our NL Central talk. I think we get into the division where there's lots of talk on who could win it, and it really comes from two teams, and that's the NL East. All three of us picked the Braves to win it, which I think is completely fair. I think the Braves have been one of, if not the best team in baseball the last few years. And I think this could be the year that the Braves can finally sneak into the World Series and then win it. And I'm honestly past the Rays.
Nothing like 10 years ago.
That
Did you forget about
No,
2021,
I
my friend?
didn't. I'm just talking about the fact that it's been what, like 2 seasons now since it happened. So like in that, with how close they've been the last few seasons or since 21 to winning it, I
They haven't
think
been close at all, to be completely honest.
getting to the playoffs though and being as dominant as of a regular season team as they are, I really think I'm taking the Braves to win the division, and I'm taking the Braves to win it all this year.
Okay, I totally agree with that. I mean, first off, Braves fans, so I will be biased, and they are my World Series pick as well. They are my division pick. Actually, no, I'm just joking. I'm gonna pick the Mets to win this division. That must have been a typo. Nope,
Francisco
just joking
Lindor.
again. I was never dropped on my head as a child, so I would never pick the Mets to win the division. Don't worry about that. But yeah, the Braves far and away the best team in this division. I don't even really know. I'm curious who y'all would even think is gonna finish. Or no, no, of course the Phillies will finish in second place.
I just don't
Beyond
think
that, I don't see it mattering that much.
I don't think the
The Phillies are a
Phillies
good team, but
they're gonna.
they can't challenge. They can't challenge in the regular season. In the playoffs, recently, that's a different story, and that's something that the Braves need to fix this season. We cannot go out in the divisional round again, and please not to the Phillies if we do, because I'm getting very sick of that, and I don't know, it's really not acceptable with the team that we have. Um, and there's it's all around just so great that I mean, best player in baseball, honestly, right now, with Shohei Ohtani not being able to pitch, Ronald Acuna Jr., he is the best player in baseball. Go across the center field, Michael Harris, my favorite player in the MLB currently. He's just so exciting. He is so flashy, but he's also just a good player too, because sometimes flashy players can't hit that well, but he hits he's a 5 tool player. He hits for average too. We traded for Jarrett Kelnick in left field, who that's a really interesting experience or experiment out there because he had some stretches with the Mariners where he was great, high prospect. I like to see him play. Of course, the infield, everybody knows. I think the one question mark there is Orlando Arcia once again. We're running it back with him, and that's a little bit of a curious decision because he was an all-star. He actually started the all-star game. He kind of fell off in the second half, and then there was that whole debacle versus the Phillies where he was yelling at Bryce Harper. So that didn't look great. It wasn't really his fault because something got leaked from the clubhouse. And then, of course, the pitching is great. Everybody knows Spencer Strider. Um,
Yes, love him.
yeah, everybody loves him
I
except
love his
for
quads.
probably fans of the division. Yeah, I wish.
I love his legs.
I want Spencer Strider to send me his leg day plan. I would greatly appreciate that. But I think people overlook a little bit. Max Fried, I think, is still the ace of this team. I love to watch him pitch. I think Max Fried is a better run preventer than Spencer Strider. I just love
I
watching him
mean,
pitch.
from an ERA standpoint, sure, but from an innings and strikeouts and I mean, yeah, I mean, Max Fried, like, by all means, great pitcher when healthy, but yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
that is fair. That's
he's
another
good.
problem. He's been hurt. He's been hurt a lot the past couple of years. And I mean, I think you could be right. I think if like I think Spencer Strider definitely has a high chance of surpassing him for the A's title this year and potentially challenging for Cy Young if he can kind of keep the home runs down. Because that he seemed to have 1 inning per game where he'd give up like a 3-run home run, and that kind of inflated his ERA. We'll see what happens there. We still have Charlie Morton, who people kind of forget about, but he was really reliable last year. I'm a big fan of his. And then interesting trade, we traded for Chris Sale. He's gonna be our fourth starter, so that's an interesting going to be interesting to watch because Chris Sale is your fourth starter. could work out extremely well because there's really no pressure on him to be that great. So if having him and Spencer Strider in the same rotation seems crazy in theory. I mean, I know he hasn't been great in a while, but that's a lot of strikeouts.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Sale recently came out and said that he's healthy for like the first time in 5 years or something. So if he can, I mean, I think he's 34, 35 now, but if he can even capture any of this success early on in his career, like even if we can give them like 120 quality innings, that's really probably all they need.
Yeah, I think him landing with the Braves is probably the best situation for him currently at this stage in his career. And then also Braves bullpen is pretty great. It's they've had some struggles, but I think they're slightly overblown because I feel like every fan base hates on their bullpen, honestly. It's kind of like in football with offensive lines. It seems like every fan base thinks that they have a bottom 10 offensive line, unless you're like the Ravens or something like that, or the Eagles. But it's kind of the same thing here. The Braves don't have an elite bullpen, but they have some nice pieces. So I don't think that's too much of a weakness. But I think if you had to say one thing, it's that, and then their inability to get past the Phillies.
I think the Phillies I don't think win the division. And at the same time, I at one point might have picked the Phillies to be a World Series favorite, but just given the way that they've been in the playoffs, they just really struggle to finish. Like they'll look very promising, and then it gets to the divisional series or just any games that really matter. It seems like the Phillies just cannot finish them.
Yeah, them losing to the Diamondbacks last year in the playoffs was honestly kind of
In
disappointing.
Philadelphia, by
I
the
think it
way.
was I think it was last year was that was their chance to redeem losing to the Astros in the World Series. I think if they honestly should have gotten past the way it was set up, they should have gotten past the Diamondbacks and had a good shot to win the World Series. But I'll be honest, I'll never not be scared of the Phillies. At least this season, I will definitely not, or I would definitely will be scared of the Phillies. Um, they're just they're a good team and they have great pitching. They have great players. I mean, honestly, as a Braves fan, I love Bryce Harper. He's a great player to watch as well. I respect him. He's just a great hitter. There's nothing I can't say anything bad about him.
I mean, Harper's moving down to first base this year too, so
It's true.
I
That'll
can
be
only
interesting to
imagine
watch.
with him being in a position where he's less likely to get hurt because he doesn't have to move that much. I can only imagine that Bryce Harper's numbers this year, hitting wise, should increase because there's a lower chance for him to get injured. But it's also Bryce Harper, so I really don't know what to expect.
I think with Bryce Harper, you should know what to expect. That he's
I
going to be a
mean, like,
stud.
I don't know whether to expect that it's going to be the same Bryce Harper or if, like, Bryce Harper, like, this is about. I personally think Bryce Harper might actually have the best season he's ever played this year.
That's wow. I mean,
I
if you look at how good his
don't know.
2015 season was with the Nationals, he's going to have to do something special this year if to top that.
Bryce Harper's
But
going to hit
I mean,
192 home runs. Every at
that
bat,
might
first pitch is a home run.
that could be that could put him in All-Star game consideration.
I think even if he hits every ball out for every first pitch out for a home run, he's not an all-star. Randy Rosarena over him, Yandy Diaz over him, entire Rays lineup over him.
Choosing American League players as an all-star over National League players, interesting take.
They're gonna have to put American League players in because the AL East is so stacked that they just have to eliminate the National League as a whole.
So basically, what I get from your prediction is at the All-Star break, the National League All-Star roster is all AL East players except for Charlie Blackmon in right field.
Essentially, I think by the All-Star break, the National League will no longer be a thing. It'll just be the AL East versus the rest of the MLB. And Charlie Blackmon. He's
Yeah.
a solo agent.
Watch out. Everybody watch out for that in the 24 season. Sorry, 2004. I feel like that one has already happened potentially, but watch out for 2024. You heard it here first, according to Shane, though.
I think those were all great takes, and I think this is the part of the podcast that I was most excited for, is getting into the 3 players that we think people should watch this season. And I'm gonna kick it off with my 3, and then if you guys have yours pulled up, Nate, if you have yours pulled up, you can read them. Bebs, if you do, you can read them, but if not, I'll read them for you. But my 3 players to watch this season are Adley Rutschman, of course.
Why, of course.
Because he's a good young player. I think he doesn't have like a lot to prove this year, but I just think a good season from him could put him in talks as probably one of the best catchers in baseball if he's not already in that conversation.
I mean, I think he's already in that pretty.
But I think he could run away with it with a good season, and I also think Adley Rutschman, if he plays well this year, can almost guarantee the Orioles a spot in the playoffs. Because if he played...
I mean, I think they already pretty much are guaranteed a spot in the playoffs. It would be very disappointing.
Don't forget about Charlie Blackmon.
Okay. So are you saying that you could see an MVP season from Adley Rutschman this year?
I don't know
Absolutely not.
I don't know if I'd say MVP, but I would definitely say probably one of the best players in the American League.
What? That is crazy.
That's not crazy to say if Adley Rutschman has a really good season this year. But anyway, my second player to watch is Ronald Acuna Jr. Because you can't come off a season like that and then not have all eyes on you for the next season. I think I'm really excited to see what he does this year. Even though it probably would mean that when the Rays play the Braves and I'm unfortunately in attendance, that Ronald Acuna Jr. is going to have himself a day. I would love to see it happen.
I believe it would be the June 14th
game.
If there's a way to prop bet on this, I would definitely bet that Ronald Acuna Jr. knocks out a Rays fan with a home run. So you would win a lot of money if you bet on that. This might be insider information, potentially. So hopefully they don't find this, but I would recommend
when you tap the ball down into my head to knock me out. And my third player to watch is more of a personal player to watch. I don't really think anybody else in the league really is, but I'd say from like a personal standpoint, I'm really excited. Like I said it earlier, I'm excited to see Shaden Boz. He's been injured so much, but when he has pitched, he's been pretty solid. So I'm really excited to see what he can do for the Rays this year, and see how he can fit himself into honestly a starting rotation that's kind of open to look for an ace with no Shane McClanahan. But
I like that pick. I don't know much about him, but I'll be watching for him. And I guess Bebs, would you like to go next?
We'll turn your top 3 over to you.
Sure. So my top 3, I mean, I don't think are like super crazy, but they're just 3 of my favorite players right now, at least. My first is actually Spencer Strider, who I'm super excited about because he, I think, has a really good chance to hit 300 strikeouts this season for the first time since 2019. Last year, he had, I believe, 288, which is unbelievable, and I think just over 200 innings. So if he can take a step forward, I mean, I think it'll be tough because he went 20-5 last year and had 288 strikeouts. So I think some regression will have to be expected, but he's also only 25, so he could still take steps forward. I'm super excited. He's one of my favorite players in the league, and at least from who I'm excited to watch, he's definitely my top one. My second player is, I think I said Julio Rodriguez. He's another one of my favorites right now. Super talented, young guy, and he's just gotten progressively, I mean, he's only been in, I think, 2 years, so it's not like he's had a ton of experience, but he's gotten better each year, like in almost every category except for essentially batting average and OPS regressed a little bit last year, but home run wise, RBIs, stolen bases, he's just improved. And again, not that, 2 seasons, not a huge sample size, but he's just gotten better. I'm really excited to see him potentially take another step forward. And my third guy is Bobby Witt. Uh, he's coming off a huge contract extension that just a couple months ago, I believe. But like Julio, he has also taken huge steps in just both of his. I think he's another one who's only had 2 seasons, but last year he took a huge leap in, again, basically every category: home runs, RBIs, ton of steals. Last year he actually improved a lot in terms of batting average and OPS. So he's another. I mean, Julio and Bobby Witt both 23. So I'm really excited to see them potentially take a couple steps forwards themselves and just continue to cement themselves as some of the best young, like sub 23, 24-year-old players in the game.
Yeah, I like those picks. Those players are all just so much fun to watch. I mean, you've got probably the most electric pitcher in the game, and then two absolute stud young five-star players or five-tool players.
All right, Nate, it's on to your top three.
Okay, so I went a little bit nerdier with mine. Um, I liked how y'all went, and you went with mostly players that you are like just excited to watch next year. I went with like three guys I think are going to take the next step forward next year. So they're not obscure, and actually Bebs mentioned two of them. But or I guess I'll get into my first one. So my first one, I chose Royce Lewis from the Twins. So he's a guy that I think people kind of discovered him like last year mostly because he was actually a former number one overall draft pick with the Twins. That was a while ago, if people remember that though. But he's been through some honestly horrible injuries in his career, and I feel really bad for him. Like I believe he's torn his ACL 2 times, which is ridiculous, and especially in baseball, that does not seem to happen often. But he's really an absolute stud. I'm looking like at his baseball reference right now, and his career OPS is 149, which means he's 49% better than league average at hitting, which is crazy. And all he needs to do is just stay healthy for a season. And I really hope that he can. It's kind of like a Byron Buxton scenario, but also Byron Buxton doesn't really get freak injuries as much. His like it's kind of his playing style that makes him get hurt crashing into walls and stuff. Royce Lewis is primarily going to play third base with Carlos Correa at shortstop, and I believe they still have Jorge Polanco at second. So he's going to be holding down third base. So I'm just hoping that he gets lucky and he can really show off to the league this year how good of a hitter he is. I mean, his last season was really good. I think some people probably definitely found out about him when he was hitting a bunch of grand slams in like a week or so. But he's
Yeah,
he's got potential. He's got potential for sure. Honestly, to like be playing in the All Star game, and who knows if he gets hot, starting the All Star game. I mean, that might be crazy over like Jose Ramirez and guys like that. But I would definitely like. I'm honestly somewhat expecting to see him in the All Star game. I really hope that happens.
yeah. I mean, he's still, which to your point too, he's still only 24 until early June, and I mean, he was drafted in 2017, which is absurd because he was drafted as, I mean, essentially a 17-year-old. Uh, so it feels like he's been around forever, and he's still only 24. So he still has a lot of time on his side.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that he can just stay healthy. That's really all I'm thinking. And I think if he stays healthy, which I think he will, as long as I mean I really hope, no freak injuries, then he'll have a great season, which he deserves. And then we'll get into my second guy, who is also somebody that Bev's mentioned. It's Bobby Miller. He's a right-handed pitcher for the Dodgers. He was a rookie last year, and he was actually really big for them because they had a lot of pitching struggles last year. And Bobby Miller kind of came in and he didn't throw that many innings. He threw 120, but he kind of held down a spot in the rotation for them. He started 22 games. He had an ERA at 3.76, which is pretty respectable for a rookie. And I think that he is going to, with this added experience and I think potentially less pressure with, which it might seem weird because I guess the Dodgers are expected to be so good. But I think with this great lineup and stuff, I think he is actually going to be able to get some attention this year and get a lot more people talking about him. He's another guy that I think could go from being kind of like someone that he's kind of known, but he's not like not regularly known. I think we could see him potentially making an All-Star game this year because he'll have a big responsibility in their rotation for sure. They're expecting him to go out there and pitch every 5 days for them, and I think it'll go pretty well. He's been a top prospect before, a top 100 prospect, and he's a starting pitcher with a 100-mile-per-hour fastball. That's nasty. That's ridiculous, honestly. So I'm looking for him to have a big season this year. And then my last guy is another right-handed pitcher. It's Brian Bayo, I believe is how you say his last name. He is on the Red Sox, and I feel like for some reason last year, if I would ever see the Red Sox on TV for whatever reason, he would be pitching, and he's just a really solid pitcher. He gets outs. I know his ERA was a little bit high, 4.24, but he had some solid stretches and some really solid games last year. And I'm looking for him to kind of take the next step and kind of start showing himself as a potential number one pitcher in the Red Sox rotation as they kind of look to build for the future here. He had 3.1 wins above replacement last year, which is pretty decent. He threw 157 innings. So it's not like he didn't have a ridiculous rate of that. But I think as he comes and he has a full season this year, he might get close to 200 innings pitched. I think he could be a bit of an innings eater for them because they might need that because they're not that great. Although I could see the Red Sox remaining around 500 because they've got some good players. They've got they got a guy from Japan last year, like Yoshida or whatever. He's pretty solid. He had a good season. Of course, they've got Rafael Devers. But I would like to see Brian Bayo kind of take the next step, get an ERA probably under like around 3.75 or below with like 180 innings. That would be a great season from him. I think he'll be able to do it as well. He just seems to know how to pitch very well, which seems kind of weird to say. But there's some guys where you can't really explain it. They're just good pitchers, and I can see him having a solid season and potentially being one of the few representatives for the Red Sox in the All-Star game as well.
I'd say if there's ever a division to prove yourself as a good pitcher in, it's probably the AL East. You have a lot of really, really good hitters in that division. So if you're not giving up a lot of runs, not a lot of home runs in that division, you're handling business.
Yeah. Also, I want to say one more thing about him is the main reason that I actually picked Brian Bayo as like a breakout player is because I was really hoping that he'll at some point pitch a day that you happen to work for the Rays, and I would request him to throw as hard as he possibly can into the team store directly into your chest. So I was really hoping that he would just see this and he would hear that.
Yeah.
And I could see that happening. So if that comes right, I think that was a great pick personally for me.
Yeah, makes sense. I definitely agree. Although I will be taking him 450 dead center, but that's besides the point. But that is going to wrap up the first ever episode of this podcast that still has no name, but that comes with time. That was covering our picks for who's going to win the divisions, who we think can break out as players, and just where we think the MLB's going to end up kind of this year. I mean, time will only tell how good our takes were. I think we could easily be right on the money, but at the same exact time, we could also have just made arguably the worst takes ever, and we won't know that till next November.
Yeah, hopefully the Marlins don't win the National League East and we get absolutely burned. You might not see me representing the Braves next year. Just kidding. It's right or I'll never leave the Braves. I've been with them through some dark years, but I think we've made some. Okay, buddy. Okay, if you want to go there, don't look, don't go to work on a day that Brian Bayo is starting in Tropicana Field.
I
Okay.
got you. I won't be there.
But
I'll,
yeah, I think we all had respectable picks.
definitely for sure. Bebs, I think you out of everybody on this episode had the most different picks. I think you went out and you went for some teams that me and Nate both I think were a little skeptical to pick out, but Bebs, you went out and you made a couple picks, and I'm honestly really excited to see where all our picks end up and see just how good we were at choosing.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
But yeah,